I'm super intimidated. I was thinking, oh my God, I haven't done this. So a little bit about my life. So I spent the last 2 years having an amazing experience. I was working in the White House, and I was the director of the Energy Division at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. And while I was there, I worked really closely with the entire team of folks in the government who were designing and implementing, this really incredible legislation, which is now going to invest $500 billion over the next decade or so, which will be amplified, say, tenfold by the private sector actors. So that's what I've been doing. So that's the last 2 years, so I haven't been teaching. And then if you remember, before that we had COVID, right? So actually the last class I taught before I went to Washington was online, because we did that for about 2 years. So anyway, so being here with all of you is really quite something. And so please be forgiving and have forbearance if I muddle my way through all of this. Anyway, it's so great to see you here. The room is packed. So you heard that I've been kind of around for a really long time in the Stanford energy ecosystem, and that is exactly right. And when we first started working here, the energy-related work was largely in engineering and in the School of Earth Science, which had a department called Energy Resources Engineering that was primarily focused on petroleum engineering. So that was that ecosystem. And there was a little bit in the business school, and but that was kind of it. So there wasn't a lot going on. But as we began to invest and hire new faculty, all this stuff started, spurting up or growing up all over the campus. And so there's a fantastic professor, Ziek Shen. He's in applied physics, I believe, who's a really creative and amazing, basically sort of advanced materials applied to many, many different situations. Anyway, so one day he and I were walking around campus and we go, it's really, really a shame because, we have all these students here, but they're all in their isolated little pockets, and trust me, like once school starts, you're going to have all your courses, you're going to be embedded, in a research group or you're with your department, and you're going to be kind of laser focused on what you're doing, right? But in reality, there's so much more than that happening on campus. So energy at Stanford and SLAC was really created so you guys would make friends across the entire campus. And as you're going through your learning experience, you don't just look to your, right to your left. You go, oh, I remember I was talking to that person in the business school, or I was talking to that person in the law school, or that person over in engineering, whatever. So really that is the purpose. So, don't worry, like, are you getting all the facts and figures? Because honestly, that doesn't really matter, because you're going to be, inundated by that. So really enjoy yourself, have fun. Get to know different people, and that what I hope you also get out of this is just how broad and deep the resources are. Because if you come to Stanford for your 1 year or 2 years or 5 years, and you don't sample the delicious salad of all the stuff that's going on here, you will miss out on the opportunity of your life. So here what we want to do is just get you super excited about all those things you can do. Most of them are just drop in, you just show up. I mean, some things you have to sign up for and some internships you have to apply for, but there's a lot of stuff that you can just show up to and do. So do it. So hopefully I will entice you. Okay. I am thinking that this is not my presentation again. You had it up there, sorry. It's almost my presentation. Okay, so how many people are in engineering? Oh my God, all of you. How many people are in the School of Sustainability? Okay, so are you like in earth scientists or no? No? Okay, maybe civil and environmental engineering? Okay, well, what about the business school? Okay, yeah, you're here. Good, okay. Anybody from the law school? Nobody from the law school. They have a weird program. Their first years, they have to, don't they actually start class right now? Yeah. So they kind of miss out on this. What about like humanities? Okay, economics? No? Physics? Okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah, I did. You're right. Yeah, physics, yes. Yeah. What else is worth studying? No, just maybe math. Okay, are you finding it?
I think it's this one, the revision one.
Yeah, Rev 1, yeah. Yep. Okay, all right. Okay, all right, sorry about that. Okay, I was just buying my time so I could ease my way into this. Okay, all right. So what I want to start off with is just explaining at least why I think this is such an amazing time to be pursuing the subjects you're pursuing and being engaged in energy. So how many think that we're moving way, way too slowly with climate action? Okay. How many think that that we're going too quickly and that we're going to risk, other things that we could be accomplishing? Nobody? Okay, I'll raise my hand. I mean, I don't really think we're moving too slowly, but I do think that there are a lot of issues that we need to manage extremely carefully, particularly thinking about nations that, don't really have adequate energy supplies yet, that, access to transportation is really hard, places don't have electricity, places, can't sustain, industry because they don't have the kind of energy resources you need. So it's a complicated landscape, but what's super exciting is so much change is happening. And in particular, when I think about sort of milestone events, I look to the Paris Agreement in 2015, where nations came together for the first time and they said, okay, that we need to get to net zero emissions, okay? That was a really big deal because in the old days, it was just like we need to reduce emissions, right? Well, that's kind of a vague idea that you need to reduce emissions. And we knew we had to reduce emissions a lot, but that's entirely different than saying we're going to be net zero. Because when you say net zero, it means that fundamentally our energy system needs to change and able to get to do that. And if you look there, we've got, of course, the people who signed up to the Paris Agreement for 2050 net zero. We have China, 2060, Russia, 2060, Saudi Arabia, 2060, India, 2070. So this is just incredibly encouraging to see this. So that's part of the equation, is the awareness and awakening to this. The second issue is like, well, where's all the money going to come from to be able to do this, right? So we need money from private companies. We need money from customers, all of us who buy energy. We need money from governments and so forth. So one thing that has happened that has been really catalytic in the United States is we passed two major pieces of legislation. One was called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which is helping to build an advanced electrical grid, build all the transmission systems and so forth so we can have reliable electricity. It's building hydrogen infrastructure, so heavy-duty industry or heavy-duty transport can have access to that. The second thing is, so that's basically an infrastructure bill that will sort of create the foundation so we can transition. The other piece that's so important is the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, why it's called that and how that's related to climate, you might be going, well, why did we call it that, right? Because it is basically a climate bill. It's actually a climate bill with a little piece of a healthcare bill. And both of them are meant to, at least in the long run, to reduce the cost of energy, and in the case of healthcare, reduce the cost of medicine. So together, when you look at the resources, one focused on infrastructure, the second one on creating incentives so that companies and individuals can begin to, buy the technologies they need to reduce their emissions. It's nearly $500 billion. Now, it could be more than that. Like if everybody signs up and starts doing this stuff, these aren't capped. That's the interesting thing. A lot of these incentives aren't capped. sometimes we say, okay, there'll be a limit. This is like, if you get there fast enough in the next 10 years to do this, you can get this big tax incentive. So nearly $500 billion and perhaps significantly more. So that's on the government side. Now, of course, many of you are not. How many people are not from the United States? Most of you. Okay, awesome. Okay, so that's an example for the United States. We aren't the only one. I'm kind of a little bit focused on that these days because that's what I've been doing. But many other countries are implementing similar type of actions. And the good thing is that once one country does something really bold and aggressive, next thing you know is everybody else kind of copies them. Not exactly, they'll come up with their own policy, because everyone always wants to one-up everybody, wants to be better. So that's why, individuals or individual countries taking aggressive action can be catalytic for action. Okay, so that's part of it. The second thing is about companies. So what we've seen over the last 5 years in particular is that companies, particularly companies who are wealthy, like a lot of the tech companies, they're making really aggressive commitments to get to net zero, sometimes within a decade and so forth. And they're willing, honestly, to pay the extra money it will take to get to a zero emission grid. And they'll hold themselves to really high standards. They won't say, oh, well, the average electricity will be net zero. What they say is, no, in every single hour of every single day of the year, I'm going to have clean electricity, right? So those are catalytic because you need to create the market. So they're driving new markets for new kinds of products. So that's incredibly important. So there are a number of these. There's John Kerry created the First Movers Coalition that was particularly willing to sign up for advanced technologies like hydrogen or new ways of making steel with zero emissions or new ways of making concrete that don't have large emissions, that they would be willing to do the big contracts with the suppliers of these to get those first projects, prove that it works, and begin to drive down costs. So that's important. Amazon has a climate pledge. Google and the United Nations are focused again on this 24/7 carbon-free energy idea that every hour it has to be clean. And at the same time, I hope part of the reason you came here is because you wanted to embed yourself in an innovation ecosystem that was exploding with ideas about clean energy. And this area, so again, this is part of not just hunkering down at Stanford. Find opportunities to meet with the companies of Tomcat Center, which is part of the Precourt Institute. They have a lot of events with private sector innovators and have a lot of internship opportunities. So get out and find out more about that. And if you want to have a job in a tech startup around climate change, get involved in the classes that will give you the experience to create your own startup with your friends here at Stanford. And you wouldn't believe how many companies there are. And I'll show you a little data on that. And then finally, to sort of, the frosting, I think, on this whole, delicious and exciting cake is the Door School of Sustainability, which brings together not just natural scientists, which was sort of the origin of the school, but brings together engineering, brings together the social sciences, brings together the private sector through the accelerator that E talked about. And so I think that this is just brand new, and you're going to see during your time here really the creation of this amazing new school, and you'll get to be part of it, and you'll get to help shape what this becomes. So yeah, if I got to start, if I were so lucky as to be born now and sitting here, I just couldn't be more excited about this. Because it's not always this way, right? Sometimes, the timing is wrong. The wave is cresting here, you're back here, or you're way in front. I think we're on this wave, and we can be part of it. So that is why I think you all have made a great choice. So part of your experience here is, interacting with this amazing group of faculty. There are over 300 faculty. We also have incredible staff. And this organization or this collection of organizations wouldn't work without our amazing staff. Over 1,000 students are engaged one way or another in energy research. So a lot of people and opportunities there. So what I'm going to do in the rest of the time here is sort of give you a sense of what this ecosystem that you've just joined is like and how you can get engaged. So I'm going to walk through a lot of different organizations that are part of the ecosystem and describe what it is they do. So this is another thing. Sometimes this drives me crazy. Sometimes I think it's a strength, okay? So what it is that you're going to hear about a lot of organizations, and at the end of it, you're going to go, well, what's the difference between this organization and that one and this one and this one? And should I apply for this program or that program, whatever? And the answer is yes. So, universities are not known for great organizational development, because everyone's really entrepreneurial. So there are a lot of programs with some overlapping functions. So if you see an opportunity for an internship or whatever, apply for all of them. Don't care who's who's doing it, because again, they're here to support all the students. And and it's not worth spending even 1 second wondering who does what when. So anyway, so the Precourt Institute is sort of the big overarching umbrella that is at Stanford University. It was created, I think, in 2009 to begin to pull together the pieces, and really sort of got traction in the early 2010s. And again, as you can see from this picture, the idea is that if we're going to solve for climate and energy, it's not going to be technology, it's not going to be finance, it's not going to be law, it's not going to be any one thing. We need it all because it's way too big. So energy is 10% of the global economy, roughly, if you just want a round number. And you can think that anything that's as big as 10% of the economy is not just going to be limited to some narrow technological niche. It is interwoven through absolutely everything, which is why the Precourt Institute wanted to integrate across engineering, the natural sciences, the humanities and sciences, business, law, medicine, education. We even have people in the medical school who are trying to understand why it is people will choose to buy an energy efficient appliance or not. Okay? So, well, what are they doing? They do brain imaging to try to understand when people are exposed to materials like that are explaining, the benefits of energy efficiency, which are the ones that make their brain go, oh, well, that's interesting. So they can measure that. So again, really a bunch of, very diverse things. School of Education. We also have the Hoover Institute, which is affiliated with Stanford. They do a lot of work on international policy around energy and national security and energy. So keep an eye out for their programs, because again, brings a very different perspective. And then, of course, we have the SLAC National Accelerator Lab. Is anybody here, did anybody work at SLAC last summer or anything? Okay, you did. Okay, yeah. So the SLAC National Accelerator Lab is one of the Department of Energy's national labs. So that means it's part of, they have 17 labs now who do very cutting edge research on energy and other topics. And the cool thing is they're here on campus, and there are jobs, summer jobs available. There are facilities, like one-of-a-kind facilities, just to give another example. So, with batteries, one of the problems with batteries is that when you charge them really fast, they basically break apart, and they stop working. And that wasn't really understood very well. We knew it happened. It's like, you have to be delicate with your battery, because otherwise it's not going to last very long. So Will Chu, he went over to the SLAC National Laboratory, and he built a device so you could actually watch at a nearly molecular level what happens when you are charging a battery. And you have these graphite particles, and they're trying to absorb all of this lithium. And if you do it too fast, they just break apart. So they were able to actually see that. And once you can see that and understand that, then you can solve for that problem. right? So that's an example of the kind of things that are at SLAC. And then finally, the Door School of Sustainability, also bringing all of this together. So that's the Precourt Institute. And just to say a little bit about the Door School of Sustainability. So there are a number of different departments. Some of them are quite well established. Other ones are newer. So let's start in the middle. So energy science and engineering. This used to be energy resources engineering. It has now got an expanded mission. Anybody here in energy science and engineering? Okay, cool. Okay, 2 of you. Anyway, it's fantastic. There have been like doubling of the number of faculty who are in this department now. And many came in from physics, from the School of Engineering, humanities, on some of the economics issues. Well, actually, they aren't coming into this department. Anyway, it's a really expanded department. That was made possible through this new school. There's also Earth system science, trying to understand the dynamics of the interaction between the atmospheres, the oceans, the land surface, and of course, humanity, who is driving so much change at a rapid pace and huge scale. There's a new oceans department. I'm really excited about that. I don't know that much about it, but really interested. The other thing is people are starting to realize that as we're solving for the climate problem, we need to think more carefully about the oceans. We understand that the oceans absorb about 1/4 of the carbon dioxide that's put into the atmosphere. And that if that's disrupted, that could be very damaging. So people largely looked at this as trying to prevent something bad happening. But now people are saying, well, maybe oceans could and should play a larger role in managing the carbon cycle, for example, if we could enhance the ocean uptake of carbon dioxide. So very relevant there. We also have Earth and Planetary Sciences. So this is the traditional geoscience disciplines focused on Earth as well as other planets. And then finally there's geophysics, which is basically how do you image the Earth above and below ground so that we can start to monitor and track how the world is changing. Then 2 more departments, a new social science division. It's not yet a department. So that's drawing both new faculty to the school as well as drawing people from other departments, particularly in the School of Science and Humanities, over to help create a division that is focused on how do we bring knowledge from social sciences to help solve for climate. And then finally, civil and environmental engineering, which has how many people are in civil and environmental? Yeah. Okay. So so long history of effort there on climate change and on atmospheric pollution and so forth. So that's a department that will be split between engineering and the Door School. So anyway, so super exciting. A lot of coalescence of these capabilities. There's the Precourt Institute running across there. You already heard about that. So there's also something called the Woods Institute for the Environment. So how do you think about that relative to the Precourt Institute of Energy? Think of them as siblings. They were formed at nearly the same time. The 2 donors were actually good friends while they were at Stanford. But one tends to focus more on natural systems, so fresh water, healthy ecosystems, natural climate solutions as opposed to engineered climate solutions. Really fantastic program on food systems and really pioneering work on biodiversity in the idea that there's a natural capital associated with all the ecosystem functions and how can we measure and acknowledge that so we can invest not only in engineering solutions but helping sustain the systems that make our planet habitable. Moving on, the Institute for Sustainable Societies. This is brand new. This is really an idea. So as we were designing the new school, we said, okay, we got energy, environment, but at the end of the day, it's people and humanity and civilizations and societies interacting with the natural earth system that is both driving change as well as the pathway to solutions. So this will be really exciting. So I encourage you to, as this gets stood up, to really engage on that. And then finally, there's the accelerator, which is how do we work better with the private sector? Because at the end of the day, it's not governments who are going to do this. The private sector is going to need to invest, build, develop. So how can we work better with the private sector to accelerate the speed and scale of climate solutions? So that's the school kind of in a nutshell. And, okay. So to just say a little bit more, you talked about the accelerator. And basically what its goal is to first focus on those things where Stanford could have the biggest impact, to invest significant resources in the development of those ideas and those technologies, and then amplify it through partnerships. And just to say a little bit, again, these are all brand new things, but the key idea is to identify what are called flagship destinations. These are like big, grand challenges that if we were to be successful, that we could help solve the climate and energy problem. So the first flagship destination is in the area of greenhouse gas removal at the gigaton scale by the middle of the century. So just to put that in perspective, fossil fuel emissions, 36 gigatons. So we want to be able to remove, this kind of climate warming pollution at, similar scale as to the emissions. So greenhouse gas removal. How many people have heard about carbon dioxide removal? Okay, all right. Yeah, so carbon dioxide removal is a subset of this. So about 10 years ago, people like David Keith and Klaus Lackner started saying, well, hey, it's not going to be enough just to reduce emissions by switching to renewables. It's not going to be enough just to capture carbon from existing emission sources like large point sources like coal plants or gas plants or whatever. We're going to have to do more because there's going to be a lot of emissions that still occur. And if we need to be at net zero, we can't just, close our eyes. We have to have a solution. So it's like, okay, let's do carbon dioxide removal. So that was that. So this builds upon that idea and says, well, gosh, if we're going to all the trouble of removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, why not get rid of the other stuff up there too, right? So methane is like actually a really big, pollutant in the or climate, warming gas. And similarly, nitrous oxide. And so why, if we're going to go to the trouble of scrubbing carbon dioxide, let's get rid of all this other stuff too. So it builds upon carbon dioxide removal, but goes beyond that. So that will be the first one, and they're in the middle of the process to identify new opportunities for these flagship destinations. And then they're investing very significant research funds to do research. So what does it mean when we say do research at the university? It means you all do research. We find ways to support our A-ships and so forth to do research to advance these technologies. So that's basically how this works. Okay, so that's sort of half of it is focus and invest. The next thing is to amplify. And so how do we do that? Well, we work with NGOs and community organizations, think tanks, other academic institutions, foundations, donors, corporations, and and so forth. So I think that's a theme that you're going to find from day one here at Stanford, that we do not work in isolation. And if you look at, what's the brilliant success that Stanford has had in information technology and biotechnology, it's all because we were deeply interwoven with a really thriving ecosystem that could quickly take the best ideas that were ready to scale and get them out in the private sector. So this is just an organized way to do this. Okay, so that is that. Okay, so decarbonizing the economy, that's what this is all about, right? Well, it's not all about. A good deal of it is about doing this. Stanford has programs literally working on every aspect of this. So just to give you a little bit of a sense of these, so we have our Bits and Watts initiative. Okay, bits and watts, right? So basically bringing the power of digitization to the delivery and generation of electrical power. So finding ways to accelerate decarbonization by having advanced controls, optimization, data science, machine learning, artificial intelligence, bringing all that to the grid. Like today, the way, not today so much, like 10 years ago, like the best way to think about like an electrical grid is almost like a dam, right? So at the top of the hill you have a dam, then you have a bunch of pipes, the water can flow down the pipes, and then you have more smaller pipes, and that goes into neighborhoods, and that delivers water to you, right? So basically it's just sort of a one-way flow that doesn't require a lot of information and data and so forth, or it didn't historically. Good example, if the power goes out at your house, how does the utility know you call them up, right? Well, as we move into an entirely different kind of electricity system and in a world where not only do we rely on electricity for, say 30% of our energy services, it's going to be 70% or 80%, right? So electricity reliability is going to be even more important. So how do we bring digitization and advanced controls to that? Second one is storage X. Okay, well, what does storage X? Well, storage is, of course, energy storage. X means it's about batteries, it's about hydrogen storage, it's about thermal storage, it's about chemical storage. It's any way we can possibly figure out how to store very vast quantities. And when we think about, how much, right? So just to put this in perspective of how much energy storage we have today, like a city like San Francisco, which uses a lot of natural gas for heating as well as industry and so forth, they actually have a reservoir that's located about 70 miles away, an underground reservoir where they have 4 months or 5 months of natural gas stored underground just to make sure they're never going to run short, okay? So that's in today's system, which is, basically you can turn things on and off. So if we imagine a renewable-dominated system where we have a lot more variable generation, you can see we're likely to even need more storage than that. So storage is just hugely important. So natural gas. So natural gas is sort of a two-edged sword. On one hand, we know that methane is emitted into the atmosphere. It's a very high global warming potential. It leaks a lot of places. It leaks in your house. It leaks in the pipes that deliver the gas to your house. It leaks where we're producing the natural gas. It leaks at major stations where we're routing gas. So part of what the Natural Gas Initiative does is develop advanced technologies for finding those leaks. And then actually once you find them, it's not very hard to stop them, particularly the big leaks. The little leaks, it does take a lot more work. So that's part of it. And the other part that the Natural Gas Initiative works on is, well, what is the role of natural gas in the energy transition? So natural gas is cleaner than coal, much less criteria pollutions, half the carbon intensity. And it's actually cleaner. For example, if you have a truck that runs on natural gas, it's cleaner than a diesel truck. So places like Delhi, in India, said, okay, we're not going to have diesel trucks. We're going to switch to natural gas trucks. Okay, that is a huge benefit in an area where air pollution is absolutely devastating. So what is the role of natural gas in the energy transition? Another very important area, catalysis. So this sounds like a scientific discipline. The holy grail is that we could find a way to take sunlight and directly convert it to a liquid fuel. Okay, we would love to do that. If we could do that, we would solve so many problems. A liquid fuel would be great. Even hydrogen, that would be great, right? If we can do that. So SunCat focuses on the fundamental science to accomplish that. Lots of work in materials. This is solar cells. This is other kind of advanced energy conversions, thermoelectrics, and so forth. So a very broad set of material research to generate a entirely new set of options. Carbon removal, you heard about this. So this has been going on for quite a while. And again, now we've recently added this other idea that we're going to remove other greenhouse gases as well. Hydrogen, this is the new big thing today, is that, we're beginning to, around the world, governments are building hydrogen hubs to try to create the opportunity for hydrogen to be part of the energy system. And then finally, sustainable manufacturing. If you look at greenhouse gas emissions, industry, manufacturing, and so forth, about 25% of global emissions are associated with industrial processes and manufacturing. Often these are simple solutions like electrification may or may not be available. So we need new solutions. And for me, I like to think about, so this whole, our civilization right now is really built on the fact that some really amazing people learned to burn things, I don't know, thousands of years ago, right? And when they did that, that was like such a game changer, right? And then over the years, people found more and more things to burn, and that really helped, advance society, make people's lives more comfortable, make it so they could do less work. They didn't have to do everything physically themselves. They could get machines to do it for them. And so, I kind of think we're like a one-trick pony, right? Because that's what we knew how to do, is combustion. So our manufacturing processes, all about combustion, because that's what we knew how to do. Well, imagine that, if we could start over and instead we had electricity, carbon-free, renewable electricity, or other kinds of carbon-free electricity from nuclear, from fusion, for example. How would we do things differently, right? It's not like combustion is so much better than other things. It's just because we really learned how to do it really well. So my dream is that we can think of entirely new processes where combustion is not the basis for all of this. So we're not just trying to, put Band-Aids and patches on combustion-related processes, but we use electrochemical processes, or we use other ways of generating the intense heat that's often needed for these processes. So that's one of the things that gets really me very excited. So these are areas where we're developing solutions, but again, it's not technology alone, so it's sustainable finance. How do we make these profitable? Because at the end of the day, people are not going to do them unless we change our economic system fundamentally. Profitability is important. And policy, incredibly important. Almost all these new technologies, when they're first invented, are way too expensive relative to the incumbent technology. So it's like, who's going to buy them? Or who's going to invest in manufacturing them knowing that they cost 2 or 3 times? So policy is incredibly important to invest early to get that experience, to prove that it works, and to get on this amazing learning curve that we've seen across the energy space, where typically for every doubling of manufacturing capacity or production capacity, costs, typically drop 15 to 20%, right? And so if you do that over and over and over again, as it scales, all of a sudden, you see things dropping, 90% in cost. Solar panels, batteries, those are technologies where I've seen in my, last 10 years, them drop by a factor of 10, essentially. It was just unbelievable. So, and policy was a key driver for that. Education. We need people at the end of the day to make good choices and buy all these new technologies. And again, it's not education within our walls, it's education broadly in your country, between countries. And underpinning all of this is this explosion in data science, artificial intelligence. Who here is involved in artificial intelligence? Okay, a couple of people? Yeah. Yeah, it's like amazing. Like I was kind of skeptical, like how much of a difference it could make, you know, and you sort of don't believe it until you see it. So one of my students took a class over in computer science on AI and got this idea, like, what if we could completely replace the way that we make calculations about like how CO2 migrates in the subsurface? You know, what if we could do that? And instead of taking like, you know, 2 weeks and a super duper expert, you know, what if it took like a hundredth of a second? You know, and could I develop a tool? Could she develop a tool to do that? And she did, and it's amazing. So I have become a real believer in the power of these kind of tools. Of course, we need to do this carefully because we need to think about equity and so forth. Technology translation. So often by the time that academics are sort of finished being interested with something, you know, you get your publication in Science or Nature, you know, and Breakthrough, and everybody's copying you and all that stuff, you know. At that point, often, like, those people want to move on. They want to discover the next thing, right? But the technology is nowhere near ready enough to begin to scale. You know, we don't know how to manufacture it. We don't know how to you know, make it reliable enough. We don't know how to make it cheap enough. So technology translation, which was a term that was developed in the biosciences, you know, of how to get medicines out the door, is incredibly important. And universities have finally woken up to the fact that, you know, they're kind of throwing things over a fence and not knowing if there's somebody there to pick it up. So now it's like, okay, let's work together and, you know, pull and push at the same time to get these things out. Social and human behavior, incredibly important, including all the dimensions of equity that we hear about, that you know, people get disproportionate burdens from energy, and other people get disproportionate benefits, and they're not balanced. So we need to do a lot of work, and that's both internationally, where there are many people who live with almost no energy, as well as within a country where poor and people of color often are exposed to disproportionate amounts of pollution in particular. And then finally, we only solve this problem as a globe. You know, any country can't do this by themselves. So all of this is woven together. So I'm going to end on this one, which will give you a sense of some of the stuff that's going on that you can participate in. And you're going to hear a lot more about this. Diana's going to talk about it. Bianca is going to talk about it. But these are all the programs that have been carefully curated over the years to give you a better experience while you're here at Stanford. So, you know, you don't just have your traditional academic experience. You can go to work for companies. You can go to work for faculty. You can work in a startup. You can do all these kinds of things. So these are some of the programs. So just sort of quickly going through the list. So the Strategic Energy Alliance is a program that large companies will make what I like to think of as strategic investments in long-term engagement with the university. They support a lot of research. Most of the foundations of everything that we do here was actually started because there were large corporations who were willing to take a bet on really fundamental advances that have now come to fruition and created what we have here. So I wouldn't be surprised if you don't find yourself working on a program supported by that. There's also the Tomcat Center for Sustainable Energy. Their primary focus is on entrepreneurship. So there are internships. They'll support students to go work with a startup. So those are fantastic. They also have programs. So say, you know, this is more for people who are in their later years. So say you're year 3, you know, in your PhD, and you've developed a super cool new technology, and you really want to think, well, gosh, could I ever commercialize this? They will help you build your prototype. That's what they'll do. So they'll give you the funds. They'll put you in touch with the right people that you need to figure out what is that prototype that would, spark somebody's imagination. So that's a fantastic program as well. They also have a postdoc program. StorageX, Bits and Watts, hydrogen program. I talked about those already. So the Sustainable Finance Program, Alicia Seiger, Tom Heller lead this activity. This is, how do we make these clean energy projects attractive enough to really attract the magnitude of the capital? And they are world-leading group in thinking through this. So next, there are advanced research projects. So you might find yourself at some point where you do year 1, year 2, and then what you find yourself is that, oh gosh, I actually have a new idea. It's not exactly aligned with what I'm doing, and so you and your, professors or whoever, your research team is, you can write proposals that allow you to pursue fundamentally new ideas. So there are a whole bunch of different ones that you can do there. So that's a really great, your opportunity. You're not stuck. Sometimes you start doing one thing and it's nice to have choices to do something else. Explore Energy. This is an amazing program. The team is over here. There are so many different things to do. You have to do them. Not all of them, but sample a good deal of them. So the way I look at being at Stanford is that, you have your academics, you have all the sort of extracurricular stuff, and then you always have your summers. And so, in one summer you can do an internship with a startup and say, oh, that wasn't for me. Well, next summer maybe you do an internship with a bigger company. And you go, oh, not for me. Well, next summer, well, gosh, I think I might want to go to work for government. I want to work on policy. Well, you can get placed, at California, Hawaii, Colorado, Utah. And these aren't just like workadelly willy things. We curate them so that you're working with like the head of the Energy Commission. So if you want to, and there's again, so just sample everything, and by the end of it, you will know what you want and who you are and how you can contribute to these solutions. And then one final thing. So every year, I think we're doing it every year now. The Global Energy Forum. So this is our big blowout energy conference where we bring in all famous people from all over the world, and you get to sort of rub shoulders with, Bill Gates and many other luminaries, and Stanford faculty are out there, talking about their work. Anyway, it's a really fun and impactful event, and again, opportunity for students to really be in the room where very important conversations are being had. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. Welcome. Anyway, thanks for listening.